with Israel making moves on Iran during Purim, and them invoking biblical stories all throughout this war, with Tucker Carlson's intrigue into organizations like Chabad, Candace Owens' exposés on the deeper history from the Ashkenazi diaspora, and figures like Nick Fuentes explaining deeper theological ideas, one word has seemingly come to dominate the narrative: Kabbalah. Judaic mysticism, a tradition dating back to the Middle Ages that claims its roots as far back as ancient Babylon. Kabbalah has been described by many in the Chabad movement or the Modocs movement as the, quote, soul of Judaism, the spiritual after dark special of Judaic teachings. Today, I wanted to take a simple and sourced look into the chaos, confusion, and overall contents of Kabbalah, explained as simply as possible, which, might I add, simple and Kabbalah don't really go together. But before I begin this breakdown, please be sure to like, subscribe, hit the bell, all that. I don't want to take up too much time at the intro. And let's get into the story. Now, Kabbalah, kind of hard to explain. Many have described it as black magic. Some have described it as mysticism. Really, what I would describe Kabbalah as is the study of the universe's source code, if that makes sense. Like reading the back-end log, but of the world. Now, Kabbalah itself literally means that which is received. This is because Kabbalah was an oral tradition for a very, very long, unspecified amount of time. Granted, when I say receive, we have to know what we mean here. Kabbalah, as you'll come to find out, is very rich with symbolism, double meaning, etc., etc. So when I say receive, think of it not only as to receive information, but to receive it, like to embody it or to imbibe it, that it is something that is not only studied textually but experienced by those who look into it. Now, Kabbalah, like all things in Orthodox Judaism, begins with a very, very lengthy compendium of books. A compendium that is now known to us as the Zohar. Now, the Zohar, like I said, is a compendium of books, all of which have to do with the deeper spiritual meaning of the Torah, as well as different, like, anecdotal stories and commentaries from famous rabbis. Think of it as like Talmud 2, the After Dark special. Talmud uncensored, if you will. It was first publicized by Rabbi Moses de Leon in Islamic Spain, very famous rabbi who he himself claimed it was just a compendium of oral teachings of a very famous rabbi from the 1st century named Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. Now, the Zohar, it really focuses on, like I said, the source code of the universe. It focuses on the idea of God and really where God comes from, where goodness comes from, where evil comes from, what role does God play in all that. It's this very introspective and philosophical text. The book exists for a while. The community in Spain gets kicked out after the Reconquista, and then all of this really kicks off with a guy called the Ari, Rabbi Isaac Luria. So we get the phrase Lurianic Kabbalah from. That is the main study of Kabbalah. He was a leading rabbi and mystic in Ottoman Palestine, so he lived like near Jerusalem in the mid-1500s. Now, he actually wrote like very little. Like, he was not an author, which is surprising for this faith tradition. Actually, like, most of it is based off of writings. He actually was just like a guy who went around and taught things and had a small group of disciples. But those disciples, they wrote everything down. And this is where we get Kabbalah, as it's understood in a modern sense. Today, a Kabbalic master is called a Baal Shem, literally a master of the name referring to the name of God. And if you watched my video on the Talmud, you'd understand that God, in this sense, is kind of like an energy, not really like a sentient being. More on that later, but all of his followers, they get called Baal Shem, okay? So they learn from him, they become Baal Shem, masters of this power, and then they go out into the world and spread this stuff across several communities, most notably in Eastern Europe. This is where like the bulk majority of Kabbalah in the modern understanding comes from. And this is where organizations later like Chabad, the other Hasidic dynasties, will form, like I spoke about in my Chabad video. Now, this is an incredibly simplified version of the history, because let me note, once we get into the beliefs, we are going to be here for a while. Kabbalah is wildly complicated, deeply philosophical, full of double meanings, and just overall wacky, to say the least. Let me note, the vast majority of Kabbalic literature is written and commented upon by Ashkenazi Jews, which, as we now know from modern science, have a large genetic predisposal to schizophrenia. I can't prove this. I'm 75% sure a lot of this stuff was just guys with schizophrenia. It reads like someone with schizophrenia was writing something, and then it's just been recorded and turned into legend. And you'll see why as I break down what these people believe. Okay, so Kabbalah's beliefs. And you know what? Just give me 1 second here. Okay. All right, Lord help us. Okay, now to start, Kabbalah centers itself around the idea of something called the Ein Sof. Everything runs downstream from the Ein Sof. So what is the Ein Sof? Well, according to the Zohar, the Ein Sof, this is the phrase used for God before God. What do I mean by that? See, God, as we understand him, is it lives within our world, right? God, throughout the Torah, throughout the Bible, is something that we interact with. It's a deity, right? It possesses anthropomorphic attributes, at least in a scripture sense, right? It's something that prophets speak to, God makes commandments, etc., etc. All the things that we commonly associate with God. But we know that God is infinite in size and scope. And so according to the Zohar, God, the Ein Sof, is basically everything that's behind the manifestation of God. That God is manifested into our world, but really the true thing that is God is so large and so incomprehensible that you really can't quantifiably call it a deity. Think of the Ein Sof and our understanding of God as a company and a mascot. A mascot is a representative. It's an image, it's a thing, it's a costume that you can speak to, it can make statements, and it can advertise on behalf of a brand. But it's not the actual corporation itself. The Geico Gecko doesn't fix your car when it breaks. It's just representative of Geico, the insurance company. That's the grander thing, which you can't speak to an insurance company. It's like a conglomerate of thousands of people. This is the relationship of God and the Ein Sof. The Ein Sof is the corporation behind God, if that makes sense. It's the Ein Sof, that energy, that is the source code of the world. This is the energy of God, the direct and pure energy of God and of existence, okay? Now, we start all of this really at the start of all of this. This is because Kabbalah has a very different understanding of the Genesis story, of how the world was created. See, they view much of the biblical stories as purely metaphorical or possessing a double meaning to something much more complicated. The main central idea here is something called Sheverat HaKalim, the Great Shattering. In 2004, U.S. soldiers stationed in Baghdad, Iraq, noticed that local peddlers were selling an interesting product. The Osama bin lighter made waves in the U.S. military. Only a limited amount of these were purchased with no tracking number by U.S. soldiers in Iraq, never to be seen again, until one brave man decided to bring back this iconic product. Available for pre-order now, Lord Miles has brought back the Osama bin lighter. Now sold in a perfect stainless steel metal casing, USB-C recharging, and of course, an included soundtrack. Folks, be sure to check the link in the description of this video to get yours today. Folks, time is running out on these. Only a limited number will be created, so be sure to pre-order yours today and secure yourself a new piece of classic history with the iconic Osama bin lighter. Now let's get back to the video. So, according to Kabbalah, there's the Ein Sof, okay? God before God. Now, this God before God wants to create a finite world. It's this infinite thing that wants to create a finite world. So in order to do that, it kind of has to filter itself down into what we understand as God. Basically, let's go back to the analogy here. Progressive wants to have a public face, so they make Flo the progressive lady, okay? I don't know why I'm going with insurance companies, but I got like a car payment due at some point soon. Maybe that's what it is. But this infinite thing wants to create a finite world, and so it has to filter itself down into a finite thing. In order to do that, Kabbalah explains it through something called the 10 Sephirot. Now, you may have seen this image before, the Tree of Life. I've talked about it, and you've probably just seen it, maybe in pop culture or whatever. It's an image that gets used constantly to sort of invoke like a spiritualism. This is the Tree of Life, okay? It's just a depiction of what the Zohar describes. The reason it looks like that is because this infinite Ein Sof goes into each of the little circles, and then it all filters down into the bottom, and the bottom, now that is our world. So it all starts on top, energy of the Ein Sof goes in the top, goes all the way down, and then it's in our world. Think of it kind of like a coffee filter. This is a central thing within Kabbalah, because this is how the energy of God is described. I've said before, according to the most orthodox traditions of Judaism, God isn't really seen how we see God. God isn't really above or like commanding the, Israel. It's behind Israel. It's an energy, it's a power that is sentient, that guides and uplifts and empowers Israel. Now, the tree, each little circle has its own like layers upon layers of meaning. I'm going to make it very simple by just talking about the top three. Qatar, Chokhmah, and Binah, okay? That's the top three. That's the most important ones. Qatar, okay, that means crown, pure will, the impulse or desire to create. This is why it is the first and most important one. It's the sheer impulse of the grander Ein Sof to create, to want to do this entire thing. Chokhmah means wisdom. Okay, that is the wisdom of God, this infinite knowledge that is now coming into the newly created physical world. And Binah, understanding, the ability for it to understand us and to understand the finite world. Like I said, it's an infinitely sized thing that is being pushed down into the world. Okay, this is the Tree of Life. Now, all of this centers around something called, like I said, Shevarat HaChalim. According to the Zohar, when all of this occurred, when the Ein Sof said, okay, it's time to have a physical world, it's time to have a finite world, and it's time for me to become God in the human understanding sense, they basically believe that it went really wrong. He sends his energy, or it sends its energy, it's not really gendered, into the Tree of Life so that it can filter down into the world, but the power is too much. It's too much energy, it's too much power, and so it goes through the first three of that big tree, the three that I explained to you, but once it gets through those three, it explodes. The whole tree explodes. And all of a sudden, all this godly energy and chaotic universal energy and all this stuff, it gets all gunked up and messed up, and it just kind of explodes out onto the world. This is also where then the souls of mankind are sort of exploded out onto the world. And in this process, all of these like weird kind of gunked up fragments called Nitzotzot start landing on the world and imbibing themselves into human souls. These are like little divine sparks of this grander thing meant to hold the energy of God that just exploded. All of this hits the physical earth, and now earth exists, okay? They believe this because the Bible says, let there be light. In the Kabbalistic view, it's not let there be light and then a light switch is flipped. It's let there be light and then this happens. This fucking thing happens. So why is that important? Well, they believe that like most of the good stuff, okay, went into the souls, the finite amount of souls that would become Israel, the Israelites, and that the rest, that's us. So we got like mostly the bad stuff. There's some good in us. There are some good people within us, but the vast majority of us were the gunk. We're like universal space garbage, basically. And Israel, they're mostly good, but what exists within them is some gunk, some universal garbage that needs to be expelled. And to them, this is how the world was created. And this is how the energy of God exists in our world. That instead of being filtered down in a proper and pure way, now the energy of God is just, it's all over the place. It's coming out of the walls. It's all around us all the time. and it's all sorts of unguided, and it's kind of just bouncing around in the world, okay? And like I said before, if you watched my other videos, you'd know that they believe that the job of the rabbis is to control the power of God. And this is the vast majority of the Zohar, is talking about how do we corral all this loose God energy and use it for stuff. They also believe that in this, a kind of like dualistic event happened, that basically the demonic was created. So this is why the demonic is seen as bad. It's basically the rejects. The full coagulation of this gunk is turned into this realm called Sitra Achra, literally the other side. Israel, they have pieces of heaven with a little bit of that gunk, okay? And then us, the Gentiles, we come from and possess this like big connection to, by virtue of our gunk, to Sitra Achra, the other side, the demonic, the impure. Dualism is a big thing in this, and you're going to see that throughout this tradition. There's a lot of good and evil, pure, impure, Israelites, the nations, the Goyim. This is kind of the central theme here, okay? That is the basis of Kabbalah. You may have heard the phrase Tikkun Olam, mission statement, I guess, of Judaism. It means repairing the world, or more literally, repairing the face of God. This is actually a Kabbalic concept. This is not found in the Torah. This is a Kabbalic concept that has just survived into this sort of modern secular age. They believe that it is the job of Israel, of this blessed people, okay, that aren't full of gunk. They need to do their mitzvot and their prayers and all these things to clean up the world, to repair this grand structure that just exploded. And once they do that, God flows into the world, and then everything is great. And the only way they can do that is when the Messiah shows up. But more on that later. For now, let's get into what this actually means for us today in the world. Now, Kabbalah is obsessed with speech as power. More specifically, words of power.
Dragonborn.
No, not that kind. Basically, they believe that words, the incantations that one speaks, that really everything that we say is part of this grander expression of existence. Have you ever heard the phrase abracadabra? That comes from Kabbalah. That's an Aramaic term, originally avrachadabra, which literally means I create as I speak. And this is a central idea, okay, in the practice of Kabbalah, especially the mainstream Kabbalah. This is why a lot of their prayers are repetitions or like meditations on words. And across the Zohar, all the stories of them dealing with demons and dealing with magic and all this stuff, it has to do with words. It has to do with like spells. This is kind of where we get the concept of spells from, at least in our modern sort of like Hollywood understanding of it, if that makes sense. Because like I said before, we keep going back to it. The energy of God is something to be wielded and harnessed and then used for XYZ purpose. And the way you do that is through words. It's through speech. It is through incantations or inscriptions. They're very focused on this idea that every single word has a dual meaning, and that nothing really literally means what it means, that like there's always a dual meaning to be abstracted from everything. So what are some of the actual beliefs and stories? Because let's be honest, folks, I know why you're here. You want the crazy demonic stuff, okay? You don't want to hear me just ramble on and on about light and philosophy. No. You're here for the crazy demonic stuff that you can show your friends. And so I'll oblige to the fan service. Let's get into the Zohar's practicality. Now, the Zohar speaks a ton about the practical applications of Kabbalah. A great example is something like Golem, that Golem can be created via incantations and drawings and stuff to create life, but like a Frankenstein's monster version of life. Now, Kabbalah posits that demons found their start, like their origin, in the unholy marriage of Lilith and Samael. What do I mean by that? Okay. In Kabbalah, they like it's a lot of stuff that gets added where they're like, oh, well, actually, we found out later that biblical story, here's some extra stuff that happened. Lilith is a great example of that. They posit this idea that actually Adam, his first wife wasn't Eve, it was this other lady called Lilith, but Lilith was defiant. She's the archetype of the defiant woman who won't lay with her husband, and so she becomes the queen of demons. Like, she's kicked out of the Garden of Eden, like out of perfection, and becomes the queen of demons. And then her and the serpent, so the devil, they procreate. And that's where like the demonic comes from, and that's where the nations come from. And so like that's kind of our origin. I think that's where the Goyim come from, is from this unholy marriage, kind of. This is also why the men are encouraged not to lay with the Gentile women, because Lilith, she's like also kind of the stand-in for the Gentile woman, like for the Goyim woman. Defiant, kind of like worldly. And so they believe that when you sleep with them, you gain a bunch of gunk. You gain a bunch of this universal gunk. That has to be noted. That like one of the reasons why, especially Hasidic communities, are so like they don't want to deal with outsiders, they don't want to deal with Gentiles, is because they believe that if you're around the Gentiles for long enough, you'll start to gain like their Goyim gunk. Like if you hang around the Goyim too much, you'll start to become one. And so that's why they're so like, let's keep them away. If you eat like them, if you hang out with them, if you lay with them, you'll become like them. And so they keep us very far away to varying degrees, with the Hasidics being the most like, okay, we're literally going to remove ourselves from Gentile society, and people like Chabad having a more friendly disposition. Another great example of the crazy stuff is this idea of dualism, because like I said, it's very obsessed with the idea of dualism, of good and evil, of pure and impure, Gentile and Israel, okay? This also involves God. They believe that God is dualistic, not monotheistic, really, that God has a dual nature, the most important being the dual nature of masculine and feminine. You ever seen them praying? Oh, Lord help me for this next part, man, this stuff. At the Western Wall. You ever really seen them praying with their tefillin and they rock back and forth? You ever seen that? That's called shuckling. It comes from the Hebrew word shuchlen. It means to shake, literally. Let me note, okay, they believe that God has a feminine aspect called Shekinah. Shekinah is the feminine, or more aptly, the receiving essence of God. Basically, when the temple was destroyed, which is an event that kind of mirrors the great shattering we spoke about, and they talk about that connection like a lot. They believe really that God split into the masculine and feminine. It's weird, I know. And they believe that the masculine form of God went and followed Israel into the world, into diaspora, into the various places they went to. But they believe that the feminine aspect, the receiving aspect, stayed. Shekinah literally means to dwell, or place of dwelling. They believe that the Shekinah, this feminine kind of like motherly receptive energy, that stayed at the temple. And so, like I said before, one of the big things about Kabbalah is this idea of sort of controlling the essence of God, of dominating the essence of God. Do you see where I'm going with this? To quote the Baal Shem Tov, zivug, coupling. They believe that they're fucking it. Yes, I'm not kidding. They believe that they're fucking it. Like that's when they are swaying like that in front of the wall, that's them fucking this spirit. And the reason they do that is to show love, but also to dominate, to take it, you know, because you have to understand this is kind of their dynamic, is that there's giving and receiving, male and female, and all that stuff. They're dominating this energy and thus enabling them to take control of it. This is why they do that. They are literally fucking it. Oh God, help me, man. I don't even want to think about that. Lord have mercy. So this is kind of the relationship, okay? And we spoke about this before with Chabad, with the whole idea of nefesh elochet and nefesh chabechamet, the idea that they have pure, enlightened souls that are able to connect with God, and we don't. It ties back to this story of this dualism, that ours, we come from Sitra Achra, which is this other side. I mean, when I say other side, you kind of think of hell. When I say demonic, you think of hell. It's not really that. Think of it more as like chaos, like a primordial kind of like universal chaos of like this is supposed to be the world of order, and we come from a world that is disordered. They follow mitzvot, they come from order, the pursuit of justice and righteousness. We are impure, we come from a world of chaos that has no meaning. They receive accusations of it being witchcraft because, like I said, in their pursuit to have order, in their pursuit of tikkun olam, to repair the world, they use a lot of like words and incantations and like actual like trinkets, because that's what they're trying to keep away. They are trying to ward off sitra. They're trying to ward off what's called klipot, or husks, shells, unfinished, unfull things. That's us. The unfull, or the empty part, meaning our lack of a divine soul. That they are full. They're full of this divine soul. They're full of this godly good energy from this great shattering that is just sometimes gunked up with this evil stuff. And we're empty. We don't have that. And so we're just made of the gunk. Like, we're made of the bad stuff. And that this is the essence of that relationship. That the Sitra Achra and its people, us, need to be controlled. Yes, this is where this idea comes from, that we can't really be trusted to rule ourselves. And this is something that Chabad especially believes in, and I spoke about it in the last video, that we need to be controlled, that we don't really have the ability to rule or lord over ourselves, okay? This is where it comes from. It's not just like nations that need to be ruled by a government. It's everything needs to be controlled, so that this grand filter that broke can be repaired, and that can only be fully finished by the Messiah. Now, the Kabbalic understanding of the Messiah is a lot bigger than just a holy man or someone who delivers a people from oppression. No, he is seen as like the last missing piece, like the final piece that will string together everything needed to fix this great filter, the great tree of life. He is the final piece that will fix everything. This is actually why the Mashiach is constantly represented with a crown, both because he will be seen as a worldly king, but also because the tree of life, the top, little circle, is Keter. It's a crown. That's him. He's missing. That part is missing. He will be returned and fix it all together via the Messiah. This is why the temple is so important to them, because to them, the temple, that's the bottom of the great filter, of the great tree. It's rooted in the temple. And so with the temple not there, the Messiah can't be received. Does that make sense? This stuff's really fucking complicated. And I'm barely scratching the surface with this stuff, okay? Basically, the Messiah has to go down this tree to come into the world, okay? Like, the Messiah is the pure embodiment of this light, of this Ein Sof power, the ultimate master of the name of God. And I guess like the receiving point, like I said before, how the Shekinah receipt, I'm getting too complicated here. Basically, he needs to land in the temple. And if there's no temple there, he can't land. He's just kind of like caught in the tree in their minds. The Mashiach, he's up there. He's just caught. And they got to fix his landing pad. And once they do that, he'll land, and then boom, everybody's good to go. And then the messianic age comes. Everything is repaired. The energy of God comes into the world purely, and the chosen people, they get to live and they get to rule the world as it was intended to be created for them. And we either like perish, okay, like we explode, because like I said, we're all the gunk, all the impure stuff, or the most pure of us, the most righteous of Gentiles, okay, they get to stay. All of their bad gunk is removed, and then in staying, they realize that the best thing they can do is serve as slaves, basically, for Israel, and that by removing all this bad gunk, it kind of removes their free will, and they'll be like happy to serve. Like, they'll be like, oh my God, I see the light now. I need to wash these people's feet forever. And that's my eternity, and I'm so blessed to have that. I don't know, I guess that's, you become Matt Walsh, if that makes sense. I would like to know, because I already know I'm going to be hearing so much in the comments about how, oh, well, you're wrong about this, you're wrong about that. This is an incredibly simplified version of this stuff. Honestly, upon reading this and understanding that like these people understand this, like they're rabbis on like a deep level, I kind of get why they view a lot of you as like dumb. Goy. Because it is like really complicated stuff, like really deep, really complicated stuff. I get why they speak about you that way. It makes sense, honestly. But what does all of this have to do with today and with everything going on and everything that you hear? Well, all of that has to do with symbolism. Remember how I said before that symbolism and things like that are really, really important? That also applies to events in the real world. This is why they do military actions on Purim. I actually want to do a whole video explaining what Purim is. It's very fascinating, but the skinny on it, the Israelites utilize like subversion to defeat their enemy Haman. And so Purim is kind of, it's kind of just seen as a holiday to commemorate all the times they defeated their enemies, usually through intellect, usually through like outsmarting them, not through like physically overpowering them, if that makes sense. This is why they launch military actions on Purim, is because they believe if they do it on that day, they are embodying themselves with this greater spirit and that they'll be able to win via intellect. And it was especially important this time because they're fighting Iran. Iran is Persia, for those who don't know. And this follows a grander line in Israeli military doctrine and tradition. You have to understand that like there is like a loose following of the rules, of the law, of the grander religious tradition. I mean, really, it's more so the religious tradition, which, like Chabad says, Kabbalah is the soul of this practice. Like, that is where the religion became a distinct thing. You have to understand all the things I just described, all these beliefs, they're forming around times in which Christendom is forming. Much of it is a reaction to Christianity. And mind you, the Zohar itself speaks a lot about Christianity in a very, very bad way, something I've already covered in my other videos about this topic. All of this is to say that the entire pursuit of Kabbalah is to become a Kabbalic master, to become a Baal Shem, a master of the word, and then be able to fully like control this grander infinite power that exists spread throughout our world. Like I said, their view of God isn't really that of like a deity that kind of lords over us, but rather it kind of dwells amongst us. And it's like this ambivalent, almost apathetic thing that kind of just exists, and that it's the job of the rabbis, by virtue of their blood, their birth, the fact that they are of Israel, that they are able to commune with it and to do things with it. And so if all this sounds crazy to you, you'd be right. But folks, that is going to do it for us today on this episode of The Narrative. I hope that you enjoyed as much as you can. This stuff is terrifying, especially when you remember that like people in power believe this, and therefore they see all of us as really kind of entirely disposable, and that crimes committed against us are like not really crimes because, again, we're kiplot, we're like husks, we're empty. Scary stuff, but if you want to hear me talk about this more in an unfiltered and real way, be sure to follow me on Kick and Rumble. I've been told by many of my fans that I should probably start putting some content into platforms like that so I can speak in a more raw and unfiltered way, the way that people like. So I definitely would love to start doing deep dives of this on Kick, where I can speak with kind of full brevity. So do be sure to follow me there, and also follow me on every other platform, every other mainstream platform. Folks, thank you so much for watching and all the love you've been showing my videos. I hope that this one reaches people, and I hope that you know, a truth is spread here. And I hope, honestly, a further understanding is spread here, because my goal with this channel, it's not hatred. I'm not a bigoted guy. And like, I really mean it when I say that this stuff is not intended to invoke hatred. I'm very interested in the study of the world, and I'm very interested in knowing what the people in power think. But let me also make it very clear at the end of this video that, like, it's a pretty small minority of people that practice this stuff. It's just the unfortunate thing is that the people in power, like the wealthiest of them, that's the ones who's practicing it. So you see how that kind of lends itself to a bit of a political quandary? Yeah, that's why. But I don't mean any kind of hatred ever in any of my videos. I don't even mean to posit a specific political position, really. But with all that being said, folks, thank you for watching. Thank you for stopping by. Be sure to follow me on all their platforms. And folks, as I always say, God bless you, and God bless America.